What if your biggest losses didn't come from what people did to you, but from the first 60 seconds of what you did next? Those reflexive, unguarded reactions that spend tomorrow's peace to defend today's ego. If you stay with me to the end, you'll leave with a compact ritual you can use in real time, a way to slow the fuse, shift the frame, and turn raw emotion into deliberate action. And I'll circle back to a founder who torched 10 years of trust in a 1-minute spiral, then rebuilt something stronger than the company he almost lost. Before we travel, a humane disclaimer. I'm a philosopher, not your doctor, therapist, or attorney. What follows is education, not personal advice. Use judgment. Speak to qualified professionals for decisions that carry risk, and treat these ideas as tools to test, not commandments to obey. Ancient Stoicism offers principles, and modern psychology offers language to describe them. Neither removes your responsibility to think. Now, to why this matters, especially now. We live in a culture of immediate replies, of public rooms where outrage is the loudest microphone, and of screens designed to train the nervous system to expect novelty every few seconds. Speed masquerades as strength. Yet in crucial moments, it is often just chaos with marketing. Ancient Stoics warned that events are less dangerous than our judgments about them. In plainer English, the world throws weather. The mind decides whether it's a storm or just a change in wind. The difference between reacting and responding is the difference between being dragged by a current and learning to sail. There's a misconception that Stoicism is numbness. That is a misread. The point is not to amputate feeling. The point is to govern it the way a pilot governs thrust, with sensitivity, not panic, with discipline, not denial. The ancients, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, wrote in an age of illness, war, and political uncertainty. They didn't tell people to be robots. They taught them to own the two things that are always inside their reach: their perspective and their next move. Everything I'll share maps back to those two levers, even when I use modern terms. I want to begin with the small hinge that moves the big door. The deliberate pause. Not the performance of slowness, not a theatrical sigh on a podcast, but an internal switch that buys a sliver of time. In the human body, emotion tends to arrive first as sensation. Heat in the face, a tightening in the throat, a burst in the chest. The reflex is to act from that blaze. Stoic practice says, meet bodily speed with mental space. In practical terms, that can be a single, deliberate breath, longer out than in, and a short look at what your hands are about to do. Are you typing? Hover. Are you speaking? Touch your tongue to your teeth and wait a beat. Are you about to click send? Place the cursor away from the button and read the first line aloud. This is not superstition. It's applied neurophysiology, wearing a tunic. By lengthening the exhale, you cue the body to release a fraction of its alarm. By shifting attention from the stimulus to your own posture and hands, you move from the battlefield to the balcony. And from that balcony, you can ask the single question that punctures most impulsive acts. What outcome am I about to purchase? A man I'll call Daniel forgot to ask that question. He had built a respected design studio over a decade. One morning, an industry blog accused his firm of copying a motif. The article was sloppy but viral. He opened the piece on his phone, felt his jaw go hard, and in 60 seconds posted a string of defensive replies threaded with contempt. By lunch, screenshots were everywhere. By evening, 2 clients froze projects. The original article was quietly corrected 3 days later. The replies, however, became part of his resume. I met him months afterward, when the temperature around his name was still warm. He told me, "It wasn't what they wrote that hurt me. It was my need to be seen as clean." That sentence is a curriculum. The event wounded his pride. His reaction wounded his reputation. One was weather, one was steering. This takes us to the inner mirror. We like to say people push our buttons, as if we were factory devices installed by strangers. The Stoic move is to turn the metaphor around. If there's a button, who soldered it there? The stimulus matters, certainly, but the size of our surge often reveals what we worship in secret. If a colleague's casual dismissal burns for a week, maybe it's because our status is the altar where our self-worth prays. If a delay at the bank feels like an insult to one's existence, perhaps control has become a surrogate for safety. The mirror is not an instrument of shame. It's an X-ray. When you feel the heat, treat it as a pointer. Map it. Name the creature plainly: anger, fear, grief, jealousy, and then ask the undramatic follow-up. What belief is this emotion defending? Sometimes the answer is instructive. Sometimes it's indicting. Either way, you have data. There's a school teacher I'll call Maya who learned this the long way. She taught 10th grade literature with passion and a high standard for grammar. For years, she felt personally slighted when a student submitted careless work. Her feedback was precise, but laced with sarcasm. She told herself she was raising the bar. Then, during a parent-teacher evening, a father asked a question that pried open the story she'd been living inside. "Do you want my daughter to fear your comments or to love the craft?" Maya went home, sat at a kitchen table covered in essays, and realized something painfully useful. She wasn't angry at the students. She was angry at how invisible she felt in the faculty room. The classroom had become a theater where she clawed for respect from an audience that wasn't even present. The next semester, she rewired her routine. She still corrected errors, but without the bite. She reserved her need for recognition for the place it belonged: conversations with peers and her own work toward published scholarship. Her students began to write more, not because she gave up standards, but because she stopped trying to settle a different debt with their commas. From mirror to citadel. If you want steadiness in a world that gusts, don't set your sense of safety on things that move when the wind shifts. The ancients didn't say wealth, status, or comfort are evil. They said they are slippery. If your peace is tied to them, your peace will also be slippery. The way to build an inner citadel is to pour its foundations into things that cannot be confiscated by a headline: your character, your habits, your attention. On a construction site, no one would pour a foundation on sand because the weather looks nice this week. You test the soil, you go down to bedrock, you anchor the load. Virtue, practical wisdom, justice, courage, self-control is the philosophical bedrock. Attention is the rebar. Habit is the poured concrete. Every day you choose what to feed your mind: noise or nourishment, gossip or study, shallow outrage or patient inquiry. You are adding or weakening the lattice. There is a quiet builder I once shadowed for a week to understand how he kept projects calm when others ran on adrenaline. He started each morning standing alone in the shell of the building, looking up at the beams, checking wind, light, and sound. He wasn't being mystical. He was orienting his awareness. He said, "If I can hear the sight, I can think." Then he took out a small card where he wrote 3 words, different every week. That week, they were listen, pace, hands. They weren't goals. They were anchors. He would look at them before difficult conversations. When a supplier arrived late and the client fumed, he would literally slow his speech by a half step, put both hands on the drawing, and listen until the heat in the room dropped. He told me the biggest change in his career happened the year he stopped trying to be impressive and started trying to be clear. Clarity reduces drama because ambiguity is the oxygen of panic. His sights still had surprises. Weather turned, deliveries failed, humans were human. His citadel wasn't an escape from reality. It was a well-built room inside reality where he could think straight. All this talk of restraint is not an argument for suppression. Stoics are often caricatured as people who choke their feelings until they die. That's not mastery. That's denial with a nice haircut. The aim is not to crush the engine, but to aim it. Emotion is energy with a story. Change the story, and the energy finds a different direction. Anger, for example, is useful when it illuminates a value that was violated and supplies fuel to repair or protect that value. It is destructive when it becomes a performance to protect a costume, the image of being right, the look of being feared. Fear is useful when it prompts preparation. It's corrosive when it prevents contact with reality. Grief can be a teacher in proportion. It becomes a tyrant when it narrows the world to a single loss. The redirection I'm describing is not a slogan. It's a practice made of 3 small moves. Name what is present without theater. Feel where it sits in the body without telling a catastrophe story. Ask where this energy can be spent to repair, protect, or create something that aligns with who you mean to be. Epictetus would call that alignment proheresis, your faculty of choice. A therapist might call it reappraisal. Different languages, same lever. There's a paramedic I'll composite from several interviews and call Luis. Early in his career, the first minutes on scene overwhelmed him. He would overtalk on the radio, forget simple checks, and slam doors too hard. He thought the job demanded hardness, so it added armor to his tone. A mentor rode with him one week and said, "Your voice tells the family whether there's a tomorrow." That cut. Luis realized his panic wasn't just his to bear, it was contagious. He began training a micro-routine on the way to calls. One long exhale to the end of comfort, a mental picture of the 3 most basic actions he must do first, regardless of chaos, and a sentence he would say to the patient's relative that contained 0 predictions and 1 promise. We are here, and we are doing the next right thing. Over time, the routine became reflex. The feelings still came. The hands became steadier. He didn't become a statue. He became a person whose inner volume did not spike when the outer world did. That is redirection in uniform. Let's return to Daniel, the studio founder who detonated his own afternoon. After his very public stumble, he did not vanish. He emailed the 2 clients who froze work, not with pleading, but with reconnaissance. He asked for a 30-minute call to understand the exact moments where trust wavered. He took notes. He said thank you more than but. He read back what he heard. Then he spent a month rewriting how the studio handled criticism online. Whoever felt the heat of a post had to run their draft response by a second reader, who was selected in advance, someone not currently triggered by the topic. That built friction into the parts of the system that had been too smooth. And he also began to post long-form reflections on design history without mentions of his own firm to shift the angle from self-defense to contribution. When the corrected article appeared, he did not point to it. He let it exist. A year later, he told me something that sounded like it belonged in an emperor's journal. I learned to trade the thrill of winning an argument for the craft of being trustworthy in public. That's the Phoenix truth in modern clothes. Fire that purifies is not pleasant. It burns the cheap parts first. There's an old Stoic line often summarized as, "The obstacle becomes the way." It doesn't mean pain is good or that tragedy is a gift. It means the world rarely consults our preferences, and growth often hides in the friction we wish weren't there. If you've ever trained your body, you already understand. Muscles strengthen under load, bones maintain density with impact, and endurance arrives by staying with discomfort long enough for the system to adapt. The mind is not different in kind. Where it is different is that it tells stories about the load. If the story is, "This should not be happening to me," attention narrows and bitterness grows. If the story is, "This is happening, what can I do cleanly?" attention widens and options appear. You can't will yourself into loving hardship. You can practice not wasting it. A preventable downfall, a delayed awakening, and a transformation that worked. Those are not moral fables. They are patterns you can test. The downfall teaches about pride disguised as urgency. The awakening teaches about misdirected hunger. The transformation teaches about installing friction and fostering clarity. If you want a shorthand, consider this. Pause buys you a balcony. The mirror shows you the gear you're wearing. The citadel gives you a room to think. Redirection tells the engine where to go. Resilience builds from doing this when the stakes are small, so you can do it when the stakes are not. At this point, it's fair to ask, how do I carry this into next Tuesday at 3:17 p.m. when the email lands or the remark lands or the silence lands? You carry it in a simple pocket ritual that does not require candles or Latin. When the surge starts, look at your hands before you use them. If they're on a keyboard, lift them a few centimeters and rest your wrists. Exhale as if you were fogging a window. Speak one sentence under your breath that contains no accusation and one intention. I'm going to buy a beat and choose the outcome I want. Read the first line you're about to send aloud. If your voice sounds like a closing door, you're not ready. If it sounds like a person you would hire, proceed. If you're face to face, aim for a question that opens rather than closes. Help me understand what changed. Or, walk me through your concern from your side. Or, what does good look like to you here? The point is not to be clever. The point is to slow the physics of escalation. Anger metabolizes quickly when it is treated like data, rather than a declaration of war. We must also clean up a subtle confusion. Acceptance is not resignation. To accept reality is to stop fighting the fact that it is already in the room. That frees your hands to do something useful. Resignation is to let go of agency and call it wisdom. The former is the precondition of action. The latter is the death of it. When Marcus urged himself to find a retreat within, he wasn't advising a retreat from civic duty or from love. He was reminding himself that the quality of his judgments would shape the quality of his actions, and both together would define his character, which is the only possession he could truly say was his. When Seneca examined anger, He didn't call it always unjustified. He called it a poor guide. When Epictetus drew the line between what is up to us and what is not, he didn't erase responsibility. He drew a map to locate it. In modern tongue, the Stoic chart is a focus hierarchy. Control your perspective, influence your process, accept the rest. Sometimes, of course, we learn the hard way because there was no other way we were ready to learn. A friend I'll call Nora built her identity on being the most dependable person in the room. She was generous, fast, and everywhere at once. When her mother fell ill, Nora tried to hold the entire family system together. Each text was treated as a siren, each request as an emergency. She wore down. The day she forgot to reorder a medication, she broke in the parking lot, full of guilt and fury at herself. In the weeks that followed, she learned the most stoic lesson of her adult life. You cannot serve from a well you refuse to fill. She began carving out 30 minutes each morning without screens, reading a few paragraphs of something difficult enough to demand her attention. She practiced asking for help in clean sentences. She made peace with being thought less responsive by people who had been trained to expect instant access. Her mother's condition did not reverse. Nora's inner condition did. She stopped equating frantic movement with love. Her pace became human. Her presence improved. Stoicism did not cure grief. It taught her to carry it without spilling on everyone around her. I want to draw a line through these stories back to the opening promise, the ritual you can test the next time the heat climbs your throat. It lives in 4 micro moves braided into a single fluid response. First, feel the earliest physical signal you can and name it plainly in your mind, without adjectives. Second, position your body in a way that signals deliberation to yourself. Sit back an inch, put both feet flat, or if standing, release your shoulders down and back. Third, ask the outcome question. If this moment becomes a story I have to own tomorrow, how do I want that story to read? Fourth, spend the energy you feel on the smallest next action that moves you toward that outcome. These are not steps to recite. They are muscles to build. In a week, you'll forget in the big moments and remember in the small ones. In a month, you'll remember in medium ones. In a year, you'll find that your default is less theatrical and more effective, and people will start describing you with a word the modern world undervalues and secretly craves: steady. If you need a metaphor to keep in your pocket, use sailing. The sea will do as it pleases. Your control is in your hands, your trim, your chosen tack. Reacting is like yanking the tiller with every gust and cursing the sky for moving. Responding is reading wind, adjusting sail, and riding pressure to where you intend to go. Or, if you prefer architecture, use the beam. Loads travel through a structure by design, not prayer. If you overload one brittle member, it fails. If you distribute the load across members that can bear it, the structure holds. Emotion is load. Values, habits, and attention are structural members. Design accordingly. We can close a loop now. Daniel, the founder, didn't get his old reputation back. He built a different one, not as the guy who wins threads, but as the guy whose public speech is a little slower than fashionable and a lot more useful than average. His studio regained work. Slowly, he still feels the surge when people are careless with his name. He also feels his feet now, hears his voice, and waits that extra beat. He told me he thinks of that minute, the bad one, as tuition. It was expensive, humiliating, and entirely preventable. He paid, and he keeps paying by behaving better when nobody would know if he didn't. That is the grown-up version of rising from ashes, not the triumphant violin swell. The daily practice of being the kind of person who does not sell tomorrow for the pleasure of being right in public today. If you've come this far, you've already practiced the first Stoic discipline, attention. We used it to see through a few popular myths: that speed is virtue, that toughness means silence, that acceptance is the same as surrender, that feeling deeply is the same as being led by feelings. We replace them with a quieter picture. Speed is a tool, not a moral. Toughness is selective exposure to truth. Acceptance clears the hands. Feeling deeply is compatible with acting wisely. The ancient sources and modern language agree more often than they clash. Where they differ, use both with humility. The Roman emperor who wrote to himself about staying decent in a cruel court was not a licensed clinician. The clinician who writes today about cognitive reframing is not an emperor. Together, they give us a richer view of what it means to be human in motion. If you remember only one thing on your next hard day, let it be the image of the balcony. When the surge comes, by the view. Up there, with a little air between your first sensation and your first move, you can see the shape of things, the story your pride wants to tell, the quieter story your values prefer, the small action that moves you toward a life you won't have to explain to yourself with excuses. You will fail at this sometimes. Don't waste the failure. Sit with its smoke long enough to see the fuel you used. Then rebuild with better material, a pause you can trust, a mirror you will consult, a room in your mind where drama cannot shout, a way to aim the engine, a willingness to let difficulty be a tutor rather than an enemy. None of this is glamorous. All of it compounds. I promised a payoff at the start. Here it is in a sentence you can rehearse until it rides with you. Slow the hands, lengthen the out-breath, choose the story. Spend the energy on the smallest clean move. If you speak it softly when your chest tightens, your next action will be wiser by a degree. A degree is how ships miss rocks. A degree is how careers, marriages, and friendships avoid the hidden reefs that sink them in silence long before any headline ever does. When you're ready to keep going, the next chapter in this journey is courage, how to act with steadiness when the outcome is uncertain and people you respect disagree. That conversation connects seamlessly with what we've practiced here, because courage without inner governance is just noise with a helmet. We'll look at how the Stoics trained fear without pretending it would vanish, how they made pre-commitments to values so choices didn't have to be invented under pressure, and how ordinary people today rehearse decisions before they matter. You'll leave with a map for the moments when the right move will cost you and you still want to make it. For now, close your eyes for a breath and try the balcony. The world can wait one more second while you choose the person who will walk back into it.